The reason why I'm a left-wing libertarian is because I loathe concentrated power, whether it is public or private, whether it is state or private. The whole point is not to live under the weight of somebody else's power. A technology can be a very useful tool as part of a political movement, as part of a political process. Look at what happened in the United States. Trump walks in there, Trump 2.0, and what does he do? He writes the legislation in such a way that blockchain is being used for tyrannical purposes. Speculation bores me. Now, those of you who make a lot of money out of it, well done. I'm not being, I hate moralists. I'm not a moralist. The greatest revolutions happened because there were some members of the privileged aristocracy that turned against their class. They were class traitors. So, you know, be rich and be a class traitor. I'm a weird Marxist libertarian. I would never ban anything like that. I would want to see that these experiments take place.
So a few weeks ago was Web3 Summit here in Berlin, and I got to do one of the things that I've been trying to do for years, which is to be able to speak to none other than Yanis Varoufakis, which is just like an absolute dream come true for me. So big thank you to the Web3 Summit team for making that happen. Our conversation ranged from why he's interested in blockchains in the first place, his work around the monetary commons, and why he thinks the digital euro is basically dead in the water. And so if you enjoyed the conversation, then make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, since doing that really helps out with the algorithm and whatnot.
A technology can be a very useful tool as part of a political movement, as part of a political process. Because, you know, look at what happened in the United States. Trump walks in there, Trump 2.0, and he introduces the Genius Act. And what does he do? He writes the legislation in such a way that blockchain is being used for tyrannical purposes. So what we need to do is we need to capture Congress. We need to capture, you know, the Bundestag in this country. We need to capture the European Parliament. We need political power. Without political power, the technology is not going to do anything. You know, you may create, you know, since the early 19th century, the labor movement, the socialist movement, create, you know, people who had enough of tyranny. They created, they carved out little niches, an oasis within capitalism. Robert Owen, whoever remembers Robert Owen, they created communities in Mondragon in Spain, already they have one today, that try to move away from the usual capitalist exploitative system and create their own, you know, democratic communities. And they worked for a while. But you see, the problem with that is that if you succeed, then you are taken over. Somebody comes and makes you an offer you can't refuse. I remember when I was a student in Britain under Thatcher, she did something remarkable which informed me on this. There was a bank called the Trustee Savings Bank, TSB. Now, that bank was created in the early 19th century by working class people who had no access to banks. So they created their own bank. And it worked magnificently. It was very profitable. And it was totally democratic. You opened I had an account there. Even if you had £1 in there, you were a shareholder and you had one share. It didn't matter how much money you had in your account, you had one share. And you voted. You voted in, you know, the board of directors, and it was one of the most profitable banks. And you know what Thatcher decided to do? She decided to destroy it. And how did she destroy it? Initially, she said, I'm going to privatize it. But her minister said, her bureaucrats, her civil servants, but Prime Minister, it's not owned by the state. It's owned by these people. And you know what she did? She nationalized it to privatize it. So, you see, the technologies were always here for democratic control. But, you know, if we don't have political power, these technologies will be usurped. You know, JP Morgan, as we speak, is creating a very powerful cryptocurrency that will be a stable coin that will be registered according to the Genius Act. And you know what they intend to do? Not only compete with Tether, effectively to have a chunk of the dollar, privatize it, because that's what Tether is. It's, you know, a privatized chunk of the dollar zone, right? But they want to do something else. They want to effectively take over the stock exchange, because they will have something more like Ethereum. So they will be share trading on the same blockchain that runs the JP Morgan stablecoin. So JP Morgan, if it succeeds, will own the stock exchange and the dollar. Now, blockchain was meant to be an emancipatory technology, and it still can be. But we need the political power to wrestle away from them all those tools that could have been emancipatory but are being used against us. Don't look at me. I have no power.
Joshua is right behind you to start.
Hi.
There he is.
I think we're on to the next part of it.
This is the next part. This is we go back from decentralization to centralization of questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe I can.
Okay.
Awesome. So yeah, it's a super great honor, Yanis, to have you at Web3 Summit, and I'm super honored to be able to speak to you for a little bit of time and ask some of my burning questions I've been having for years. In case, maybe just for context for people, I've been running a platform called the Blockchain Socialist for quite a few years now, so it's been quite some time. I've been thinking about these questions around the intersection of left-wing politics and the crypto space. But one thing I can definitely note of my time doing this is that it's quite a, it's a small space. it's a lonely one, and there aren't too many other. I mean, I would say that the community of people who are proudly on the left within the crypto space, I probably know 90% of them. So, like, I think the impression that I think a lot of people would have on the outside of you coming to Web3 Summit is perhaps that you are crossing enemy lines, right? You have been talking about stable coins, and I think if you talk to at least like a broader left that is quite skeptical of cryptocurrency, and I would say, at least in my conversations with some, very anti-cryptocurrency or blockchains, and not in the sense that they don't want to really entertain the idea. And I know you have been vocal about having some tacit amounts of support, but I think the first question that came to me when they announced that you were coming was, why are you here? And I mean that in the sense of, like, is there something interesting for you here, and what types of potentially like strange political alliances you think may be worth exploring by being here at Web3 Summit?
Well, look, when Satoshi published his famous paper, I read it a few weeks after it was published, and I was mesmerized. So I don't feel that I'm crossing any enemy lines here. I was interviewed by Wired magazine in early 2009, and I was asked what I thought about, Bitcoin. And I said, it's a fantastic solution to a problem we have not discovered yet, right? Yeah. So I'm still trying to find out what that solution is and what the problem is actually. And look, I really don't feel that way. I think that everyone in here is interested in technologies that can be utilized for the betterment of humanity, for our emancipation, for us to become free of tyranny. So in that sense, we are comrades. Now, we may disagree on how that works out and how it is applied and what we do. But that's the beauty of dialogue. We learn from each other. And the reason why we need democracy is because there is no blueprint that is hidden somewhere, and it's up to some LLM model to discover it. Good ideas have to be crowdfunded and crowdsourced. So that's why I'm here. Now, let me tell you something that, and all of you, that might be of interest to you. Look, I'm an unreconstructed lefty Marxist, right? Now you can boo. But, Marx was a libertarian, not a Marxist. Remember, maybe you didn't know that. when Marx was an old man, very old man, just before he died, 3 or 4 young Marxists went to talk to him, and they talked to him about, their plans and what they think should happen to the world, and he listened to them. And then they said to him, so, teacher, what do you think of what we said? And the answer was, if you are Marxists, I am not. So, but look, I'm saying this so that we know where we are. But I fear the reason why I'm a left-wing libertarian is because I loathe concentrated power, whether it is public or private, whether it is state or private. the whole point is not to live under the weight of somebody else's power. So allow me to just say something briefly regarding my background, which may connect with you folks. When I became finance minister of Greece, Greece was completely bankrupt. Our banks were bankrupt. Our people were bankrupt. And the powers that be, in Frankfurt, in Berlin, in Brussels, they wanted us to take another bailout for the banks. So that we, when you can't repay your mortgage, they give you a credit card to draw money from it, to pretend you're paying your mortgage. And then when that credit card runs out, they give you a second one, and then a third one, and then the fourth one. This is kicking the can down the road. So I knew that when I was elected to say no more. We want to allow us to be bankrupt. We want to experience bankruptcy because it is the only way of ending that vicious cycle, right? They wouldn't allow us to be bankrupt, even though we were as bankrupt as anyone can get. So I knew they were going to shut down our banks, which is what they did. And I had foreseen that a year and a half before we won the election and I became finance minister. And together with people whose name I'm not going to reveal because they will be demonized like I am, they were not Greek. They were from, one was, but the rest were from Singapore, from the crypto space. The whole point was to create automatically digital wallets for every citizen or resident based on their tax file number. And to allow the liquidity to be created and to be distributed. So, we owed pensions, well paid in the form of this cryptocurrency, which, however, is publicly owned and is based on tax file numbers. We were ready for it. Unfortunately, my prime minister, once we got 62% of the vote in favor of this kind of resistance, defected to the central bank side. And I resigned, and the rest is I'm here with you, which is great. So, is this crossing enemy lines?
I mean,
I think we are comrades in arms.
I mean, for me, no, of course. I'm super glad to invite you to be here. I think it's just something that's kind of surreal for me, at least, based on my experience of trying to talk to the broader left about this in any meaningful sense. So no, you're totally welcome to be here, and I'm glad you are. I think so. One of the other question I had, because you kind of you said this quote, I wanted to mention it as well, that you thought I can't remember if it was Bitcoin or blockchain, but it solves a problem that we don't yet have. You mentioned that, and I know you've also mentioned smart contracts as a pretty interesting innovation.
Of course.
I was wondering if there was any relation to these things with your concept of cloud capital and in techno-feudalism. Is the crypto space a form of cloud capital, or is it something different?
It's not.
Is it opposed to it?
Not at all. The crypto space is not a form of cloud capital. Well, stable coins are becoming that. Stable coins are becoming that.
Right.
Because that's not the crypto space, right? We're talking about decentralized, properly decentralized stuff like Bitcoin, like Ethereum. That is really the opposite of cloud capital. Cloud capital is machinery, network machines, the purpose of which is to manipulate your behavior. Bitcoin is not that. I have my criticisms of Bitcoin, and my main criticism is the fixed money supply, the pre-programmed quantity of money. As a macroeconomist, I think this is a catastrophe. It's a very big, but it's not an attempt to manipulate people's behavior.
Right.
It's an attempt to create scarcity in order to keep its value, either constant or increasing. But no, cloud capital is all about machinery that converses with you, that it trains you to train it to train you, okay? To impart information so that it gives you good advice, wins your trust, and then comes the whopping modification of your behavior, which is in the interest of the owner of this cloud capital. Bitcoin doesn't have owners.
Right.
There are people who have Bitcoins, but nobody owns Bitcoin, and that's the beauty of Bitcoin.
So, to get back to one of the quotes that I mentioned, you were saying it didn't solve a problem yet. Do you think there are problems now around techno-feudalism that the crypto space should be looking at that it can perhaps provide solutions for?
Absolutely. For instance, how do you run a real estate system as social housing, for instance?
That was one of I wrote about this.
Now, I think that blockchain has a lot to offer when it comes to creating social housing and making the system by which space in social housing is allocated fairly, squarely, and in a democratic manner. That's just one example.
Yeah. Okay, no, I mean, that's so validating because I wrote about this so long ago in a more comedic way. But one thing that I was interested also, your thoughts on is, a lot of people in here are, maybe consider themselves on the left, and they also engage with speculative capital, as in they engage, either they work for a company that involves speculative capital, or in some way they have some sort of relationship to it. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts strategically, how should the left be engaging with speculative capital?
Well, look, I personally find it very boring. Speculation bores me. Now, those of you who make a lot of money out of it, well done. I'm not being, I hate moralists. I'm not a moralist. The reason why I would never work in the City of London or in the Wall Street is because I would be bored. I would kill myself. I would slash my wrists. It's not interesting to me. I'm very interested in working out how these derivatives work. How do they construct them? How do they evolve? But for me to be a trader, these things, it's not a life worth living from my perspective. But I do believe in not being moralistic. People say to me, Yanis, you talk about the working class, you're a lefty, you call yourself a Marxist, but you're rich. Well, by the way, I'm not rich. I'm very privileged, exceptionally privileged. I choose my projects, I choose my partners. In this day and age, to be able to choose your projects and not to have to work for a capitalist. That is, that's the greatest monopoly power in the world, the greatest wealth in the world. And I'm far better off than the vast majority of people out there. But, on the other hand, who was it that helped the slaves free themselves from slavery? It was rich people in London with the anti-slavery society. I mean, who funded Marx to write Das Kapital? It was Friedrich Engels, who was a stinking rich capitalist with factories exploiting workers in Manchester. Now, is this hypocrisy? No, I don't think it's hypocrisy. Because, the greatest revolutions happened because there were some members of the privileged aristocracy that turned against their class. They were class traitors. So, be rich and be a class trader.
Yeah, so I'm also a big fan of being a class trader. So any rich people want to give me money, let me know. So one of the more recent ideas you mentioned before is the monetary commons. And it kind of comes out of, as far as I can understand, it's a critique of the existing financial system. It's also, in part, a critique a little bit of even the current existing version of how stablecoins exist. I'm wondering, if you can maybe explain a little bit about it and where you kind of see maybe crypto could potentially play in the monetary commons. Because I think when I read the piece that you wrote with some of my friends actually, and other things I've read of yours, it almost felt like you were describing a blockchain without saying it.
It is a blockchain.
Oh, okay, so we can confirm that.
It's a blockchain.
Okay, well, why not say it then?
Well, because, it was a piece of political economy. I didn't need to talk about the actual technology, right? Okay. I mean, for me, technology is a tool. Yeah. It's not, I'm not fetishistic about technology. Sure. Blockchain is very useful. I've said this before, I'll say it again. And the system that you're referring to is blockchain-based. Like the one that I was designing when I was in the finance ministry in Greece. Blockchain is my go-to technology for decentralization, but that's by itself is not enough. You need other stuff as well. Of course. So just for the benefit of the audience, the idea of the monetary commons is this. Imagine that, let's stick to Germany or Europe, the Eurozone, since we're here. Imagine you could take a phone and download an ECB app, European Central Bank app, and that, immediately you have a digital wallet, which is offered to you by the central bank. And you can tell your employer, your friends, whoever owes you money, put the money in there. And you have a PIN number, like you have with Google Pay, whatever, but underlying that is a blockchain. In the same way that the Chinese did this with, BRICS Pay. BRICS Pay is based on a blockchain.
Right.
Right? Because it works. And it's decentralized, and they don't have to, India and China to fall out as to who's controlling the ledger.
Right.
So, we have that. So, okay. And why would you want to transfer your money from, Deutsche Bank, Finanzbank to your digital wallet? Well, firstly, because you are guaranteed free transactions, no fees. Secondly, because you collect overnight the interest that the European Central Bank pays the bankers for their reserves. Effectively, you have a bank account with the ECB, and you get the overnight rate, which is always much higher than what private banks will give you. So that creates competition for the private bankers. Not a bad thing if you believe in competition, okay? And then the exciting thought emerges. As money is being transferred from private bank accounts to these ECB digital wallets, the quantity of money falls precipitously. Why? It's the negative multiplier effect. We know, don't we know that every dollar that the private banker gets from a central bank, from you, from me, they create another 20. This is the money market multiplier. So that works in reverse. When a dollar goes from the private banks to the digital wallet, right, many dollars that are privately minted have been destroyed. So the money supply comes down, which is a bad thing because it's deflationary. So we want to keep it up. How do we keep it up? Well, how about the ECB granting everyone a trust fund? To everyone. A large sum of money to ameliorate for the drop in the money supply as a result of having transferred funds. So the more money migrates from the private banks to these digital wallets, this crypto system, which, by the way, will be totally transparent. The ECB will not be able to inflate without you knowing, because that being a blockchain, everybody will know how much money there is in the system, unlike now, when we have no idea what the ECB is doing, no idea what the private bankers are doing in terms of money creation. So suddenly we have a universal basic trust fund for everyone. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
I'm not opposed to it.
Well, you tell this to a Frankfurt banker, and the hitmen come. Immediately. They will get you in your sleep.
Right. As a disrespecter of private property, yeah, I appreciate it. But do you think that the crypto space is a place to experiment with something like this, to take what you're kind of describing? Because I think one of the things that, at least for me, was kind of why I find it worth my time and interesting to engage in this space, even if there's a lot of things that I disagree with it. At the very least, this space is a place where you can take what is available and begin to experiment and show that something like this is possible.
I agree entirely. I'm a libertarian. I'm a weird Marxist libertarian. I would never ban anything like that. I would want to see that these experiments take place. Look, because I'm an old fart, as you can see. I remember it was 1991. I used to live in Australia. That was well before crypto. We didn't even have the internet at the time. We didn't call it the internet. We used to call it Janet. Seriously. I am old enough to remember the internet being called Janet, Joint Academic Network. No, seriously. Back then, there was a recession in Australia. It was a global recession. And unemployment rose substantially. And there was a community in the Blue Mountains, a very beautiful area just outside of Sydney, where they created their own local currency. I mean, we've seen this in many parts of the world, but that worked beautifully, and it was done based on labor time. So you'd work at a grocery for 8 hours, and you get the equivalent of 8 hours of credits. And then you could use these credits at the butchers to buy meat. And so, because the people were impecunious, most of them were unemployed, there were stores that had the capacity to sell stuff, but there was no demand. There were people who could work, but there was no labor demand. So they resolved that by creating their own local currency. Now, they didn't have blockchain then, but if they did, it would be brilliant.
Right.
So, let a million flowers bloom. Crypto flowers bloom.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think.
But it won't be a replacement for fiat. The monetary commons is.
Totally. Yeah. I think this is interesting that you say that, just because I think it's helpful to recontextualize history a bit of the left being also a political project that has engaged with monetary and economic experimentation, and that isn't just something that libertarians get to do, right-wing libertarians get to do with Bitcoin, but as is in fact, there is a long legacy on the left of these experimentations.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think maybe just the last question I was curious to get your thoughts on, because you mentioned with the monetary commons and the digital euro is coming, I think, in 2030 is what they say.
It will never come.
Okay.
It will come in a decrepit and circumscribed manner, because the bankers will actually harm it very substantially. They will just injure it and create a ridiculous version of it, so that nobody really wants it.
Right.
They will, it will suffer a death by 1,000 cuts, because it's completely against their interests. Christine Lagarde, the president of the ECB, was ready to launch it. But now they're going to put limits on it. You won't be able to have in your digital wallet more than, 1,000, 2,000 euros. You will only be there will be a limit in the number of transactions per month. I mean, these people have no compunction whatsoever. They no shame.
It's a very bad blockchain.
Yeah, I mean,
more or less.
I'm not even sure what technology they're using, but in the end, it doesn't matter, because it is being created to fail.
Right. Okay. So I mean, I guess that.
Unlike the Chinese currency.
Right. I mean, do you have any last words to say about in the geopolitical context, with?
Oh, the Chinese use blockchain very, very effectively. Yeah. They have now 3 payment systems that are based on blockchain, 3, and they are working beautifully. They, when the Chinese do something, they do it well these days. So blockchain is something that they really mastered.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I think I'm at time. So
okay.
Thank you so much for coming and coming
thank
to
you.
the summit. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.